Last week we talked about the universal experience of suffering. We all suffer. It is part of the human condition. But we also have compassion. Self-compassion, though, might be a little bit more difficult for some and not come as naturally. So we did an exercise to try to start to develop some self-compassion. Tonight I want to talk about something different that might also not come naturally for some, and that's positive thinking. So if you're one of those people that automatically assumes the worst, or has negative thinking, or is always on the lookout for danger, then you are in really good company, because that has been pre-programmed or hardwired into our brains. From an evolutionary perspective, it was incredibly helpful to keeping humans alive. Because if we were always on the lookout for danger, or the next thing that could harm us, or the negative stuff in our environment, then we were much more likely to stay safe. In contemporary society, though, that's much less helpful. We don't always need to be on the lookout for danger or to focus on the negative stuff. So how this plays out is in our relationships, in the way that we talk to ourselves, in our memories, really across the board in every aspect of life. I bet that you can remember negative comments or things that have been said to you throughout the years much more easily than you can remember the compliments. For me, I remember a mean comment that a kid said to me in elementary school in detail, but I couldn't remember a compliment that somebody said to me in elementary school. Our brains just automatically remember those negative experiences much easier than they do positive ones. Let's say you have a performance evaluation at work and it comes back really, really positive. But there's one area that your boss mentions that you might need improvement in. Most likely that is the one thing that you're going to remember and take away from your conversation. We automatically focus on the negative, and that's called a negativity bias. We all do it. It's a natural part of human nature, but it can cause us some problems in terms of anxiety and depression and just overall unhappiness. John Gottman is a well-known researcher who studies marriages and couples, and he looks at what makes marriages work or not work. And what he found is that there is a very specific ratio of positive to negative interactions that must exist in order for a couple to have a happy marriage. What he found is that 5 positive interactions need to occur for every 1 negative interaction. You might be wondering, how could that possibly be? Well, without getting too technical, our brains essentially react to negative information differently than they do positive information. So there's this part of our brain called the amygdala, which essentially acts like a smoke detector, and it alerts us of danger or potential harm in our environment. So when that smoke detector goes off and alerts us of danger, those memories are much more likely to get encoded into our long-term memory storage system. So memories from negative experiences are absorbed quicker and easier than memories from positive experiences. I'll give you an example of this. I bet you can remember where you were and what you were doing on 9/11, but try to remember where you were and what you were doing on September 5th of that same year. Chances are you can't. And the reason for that is because negative memories get absorbed much quicker and easier than the positive ones do. And on top of that, our brains can also get into patterns of thinking. So we can get into these negative thought patterns that almost become automatic. We go on autopilot, and negative thinking promotes more negative thinking and more negative thinking. It's almost as if you are on a train of negativity. And once that train gets going and it has momentum, it's really hard to stop. The good news is neuroplasticity, which means that we can rewire our brains. So we can train our brains to, instead of focusing on negative experiences, focusing on positive ones. So I'm going to talk about a few ways today that you can start to retrain your brain. Knowing that our brains more easily absorb negative information than positive information means that we need to be that much more intentional about trying to remember those positive experiences. So trying to savor the moment or relish in the moment is really, really helpful to improving your chances of remembering those positive things. So when something pleasant happens or something positive occurs, try to take like 20 or 30 seconds and just sit with it. Just absorb in it as much as you possibly can. paying particular attention to the details of your senses, like what were the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the textures. And the more you can go into detail, the more likely it is to become encoded in your memory. So the next time you walk outside, let's say, and you feel that warm sunshine beating on your face, why don't you stop for 20 or 30 seconds and just pay attention to it? Just absorb it. You might even want to say to yourself, I really want to remember this. And so you try to pay particular attention to all those details around you. Or the next time a loved one says something nice about you, gives you a compliment, instead of just moving on or getting distracted, why not taking a few seconds and just relishing in it, savoring that moment? It's much more likely to become a memory for you if you take a few seconds afterwards to just let it soak in. The second thing to try is gratitude journaling. A few weeks ago, my video was on how to feel grateful despite difficult circumstances. And we did an exercise using the acronym GLAD, which just was a prompt for how to think gratefully. It's really true, though, that focusing on the things that we're grateful for, as opposed to our problems or stressors or deficiencies, can really change your perspective and lead to more positive thinking and happiness. Third, last week we talked about self-compassion, and it's really true that the more that we can be compassionate and kind to ourselves, the less focused we are going to be on negative thoughts or self-criticisms. And lastly, negative thoughts can become automatic. So when something happens, even if it's neutral, our brains sometimes go automatically to those negative thoughts or those pessimistic viewpoints. And like I said earlier, it can almost be like this train that once the negative thoughts start, it leads to more negative thoughts. And so it's almost hard to slow down or stop that momentum. But in the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy class that I'll be starting soon, we're going to learn how to recognize we're on that train. So we're going to recognize that our thought patterns are negative. And then once we recognize, yep, this is the way I'm thinking right now, then we have the power to choose to continue those thoughts or to choose to think differently. And maybe thinking differently means that we do a breathing exercise or a grounding technique, or we journal, or we go outside for a walk, or we do a meditation. There's lots of different ways to change your perspective. But the point is that we can choose to continue to think negatively, or we can choose to think positively. So at New London Counseling Center, we really want to spread the word that positive thinking can change your brain and ultimately change the way that you feel, change the way that you act, and the way that you think. So that's why we're starting the Positivity Rocks project. Check this out. It is the perfect time to focus on something positive and uplifting, which is exactly why New London Counseling Center has decided to launch Project Positivity Rocks. We can change our brains. We can rewire our brains from the inside out simply by choosing to think positively. But we want to spread that awareness throughout our community to choose joy, compassion, gratitude, appreciation, and positivity. We're putting together hundreds of packages of rocks and paints and educational materials about the power of positive thinking. Kids are going to paint those rocks with messages that are positive or inspirational or that evoke a feeling of gratitude. And then they're going to place those rocks in an area where they're going to see them every day, whether that's in their yard or by their sidewalk or in their houses. Each time they see the rock, they're going to be reminded to think positive. Stay tuned to newlondoncounselingcenter.com for more information on how we're going to distribute packages, where we're going to distribute them, and how you can get yours. Positivity rocks.
New London Counseling Center is still offering telehealth services to both new and existing clients regardless of financial situation. If you or someone you know would like to schedule an appointment with a member of our licensed clinical team, call 484-746-3112. Thank you for watching and for the generous contributions of those who have made mental health care accessible in our community. Want to take a more in-depth look at how to unwind, recharge, and live life with less stress and more calm? Follow the link in the description to sign up for alerts on our upcoming mindfulness-based cognitive therapy class.